"You've got to be kidding me," I muttered, staring at the bank statement in my hands. The name of the account leaped off the page: Hopeful Hearts Foundation. At first glance, it looked legitimate. A charity name, regular transfers from our joint savings account, and an unassuming address. But I knew better. There was no Hopeful Hearts Foundation, and the steady stream of withdrawals lined up far too neatly with Michael's late-night business meetings and unexplained expenses. I felt the blood drain from my face as I sat at the kitchen table, the evidence of his betrayal spreading out before me. My name is Lillian, and for 10 years I thought I knew the man I'd married. Michael was charming, successful, and quick to flash a reassuring smile whenever life threw challenges our way. He was the kind of man who could talk his way out of anything, and for years I believed every word. But now, staring at this bank statement, it was impossible to ignore the truth. Michael wasn't just funneling money out of our savings, he was using it to fund his mistress under the guise of a fake charity. My hands trembled as I opened my laptop and started digging deeper. I traced the transactions, each one leading to the same account. I Googled the charity name, hoping I'd find something, anything, that would prove my suspicions wrong. Nothing. No website, no social media presence, no history. I clicked on the address listed on the bank statement. It led to a generic office building in the city, one I knew Michael had no reason to visit. My heart sank. This wasn't just a hunch anymore. It was fact. Michael walked into the kitchen an hour later, whistling to himself as he dropped his briefcase on the counter. "Hey, babe," he said, leaning down to kiss me. "How was your day?" I forced a smile, slipping the bank statement under a pile of mail. "Fine, just going through some bills." "Anything interesting?" he asked, grabbing a bottle of water from the fridge. "Nope, same old stuff," I said casually, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. He nodded, oblivious, and walked out of the room. As soon as he was gone, I exhaled shakily, clutching the edge of the table to steady myself. This wasn't the time to confront him, not yet. Michael was smart, but he'd grown careless enough to leave a trail. And if I was going to handle this, I needed to be smarter. Sitting back down, I opened a fresh notebook and started taking notes. Dates, amounts, patterns, it all went into my makeshift ledger. I didn't know what my next move was yet, but I knew one thing for sure. Michael wasn't getting away with this. He thought he was untouchable. That was his first mistake. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Michael slept soundly beside me, completely unaware that the delicate balance of our life together had been shattered. I replayed every suspicious moment in my head, the last-minute business trips, the late-night phone calls he took in the garage, and the vague explanations that never quite added up. For years I'd dismissed my unease, convincing myself that I was being paranoid. Now I had proof. The next morning, after Michael left for work, I grabbed my laptop and dove deeper into the trail he'd left behind. The more I uncovered, the angrier I became. Not only had he funneled tens of thousands of dollars into this charity, but he'd also used it to pay for luxury items, flights, and hotel stays. One invoice stood out, a receipt for a diamond necklace, delivered to an address I didn't recognize. My stomach churned as I Googled the address. It was a high-end apartment complex across town. It didn't take long to confirm what I already suspected. The apartment belonged to Rebecca, the woman I'd once overheard Michael refer to as just a colleague. I clenched my fists, the betrayal cutting deeper with every new discovery. This wasn't just about the money. It was about the lies, the manipulation, the audacity to use our hard-earned savings to support his mistress. I called my best friend Amanda later that day. She'd always been the level-headed one, the person I turned to when life felt overwhelming. "You're not seriously thinking of letting this slide, are you?" she asked after I explained everything. "Of course not," I said, pacing the living room. "But I can't just confront him. He'll deny it, twist the story, make me out to be the villain. I need something stronger, something he can't talk his way out of." Amanda was quiet for a moment. "What about the authorities? Couldn't you report him for fraud or embezzlement?" Her suggestion planted a seed. "Maybe," I said slowly, but I need to gather more evidence first. If I'm going to do this, I need to make sure there's no way he can escape the consequences. Over the next week, I became a woman on a mission. I printed every bank statement, copied every transaction, and compiled a file so airtight that not even Michael could poke holes in it. I even reached out to an investigator I found online, someone who specialized in financial fraud. The investigator, Detective Carter, agreed to meet with me the following week. "If what you're saying is true," he said over the phone, "we can definitely build a case. But I'll need concrete evidence to move forward." "You'll have it," I replied, my voice steady. For the first time since discovering Michael's betrayal, I felt a glimmer of control. He thought he was clever, but he hadn't counted on me fighting back. By the time I met with Detective Carter, my file was a meticulously organized masterpiece. Every transfer, every purchase, every link to Michael's so-called charity was documented in painstaking detail. We met at a small cafe on the other side of town, a deliberate choice to ensure Michael wouldn't suspect anything. Carter was a no-nonsense man in his 40s, with sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "This is solid," he said, flipping through the pages of my file. "You've done most of the work for me." "I had to," I replied, taking a sip of my coffee. "Michael is careful. He knows how to cover his tracks. But I've been keeping this to myself for weeks, and I need to know it's going to lead somewhere." Carter nodded. "It will. With this much evidence, we can launch an investigation into the charity account. If it's as fraudulent as it looks, the bank will freeze it, and we'll move forward with charges." The weight on my chest began to lift, but I wasn't ready to feel relief just yet. "What happens next?" "I'll file the paperwork to initiate a formal inquiry," he said. "But if you want to take this one step further, we can set up a sting. Let him think he's in the clear, and then catch him in the act." The thought sent a shiver down my spine. "You mean wait until he tries to withdraw money?" "Exactly," Carter said, his tone matter of fact. "We'll track the account, monitor his activity, and coordinate with the bank. When he makes his move, we'll be there." That night, I sat in the darkened living room going over everything Carter had said. The idea of letting Michael dig his own grave was tempting, but it also meant playing the part of the oblivious wife for a little while longer. It wasn't going to be easy, but I knew it was the only way to ensure he faced the consequences of his actions. The next morning, I transferred $50,000 into the charity account. It was money I'd been saving in a separate, secret account for emergencies. Money Michael didn't even know existed. But I marked it clearly in the bank's system. Donations under investigation. Michael didn't suspect a thing. Over the next few days, he was unusually chipper, humming to himself as he pored over his phone and dropped hints about big plans. I smiled when appropriate, laughed at his jokes, and played the role of the supportive wife. Inside, I was counting down the days until the trap was set. He had no idea what was coming. The days that followed felt like a test of endurance. Each morning, Michael would waltz into the kitchen with an extra spring in his step, checking his phone obsessively while muttering things like, "Just a little longer, and everything will fall into place." I'd smile from behind my coffee mug, pretending to share in his excitement. Little did he know, the place everything was falling into was a holding cell. Detective Carter kept me updated on the investigation. The bank had flagged the account and placed it under close scrutiny. Every transaction, every login, every transfer was now under a microscope. "He's getting reckless," Carter said during one of our calls. "The patterns are clear. He's making plans for a big withdrawal." "How soon do you think he'll try?" I asked, pacing my office. "Within the next week," Carter replied. "When he does, we'll have everything ready. Are you prepared for what comes next?" His question hung in the air. Was I ready? For weeks, I'd been steeling myself for this moment, but now that it was so close, doubt crept in. "Yes," I said firmly, brushing away the hesitation. "I'm ready." That weekend, Michael announced he'd be leaving early Monday morning for a work trip. He made a show of packing his bag, throwing in suits and ties as though he were heading to an important conference. Another business deal? I asked casually, folding laundry nearby. Something like that, he said with a grin. Big opportunities on the horizon. Don't wait up for me. I'll probably be gone all day. I nodded, biting the inside of my cheek to keep from smiling. The night before his trip, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the steady rhythm of Michael's breathing beside me. Part of me wanted to shake him awake, to confront him right then and there. But I couldn't. I'd come too far to let emotions ruin the plan. Instead, I silently rehearsed every step of what would happen the next day. Carter had assured me that the authorities would move swiftly, intercepting Michael at the bank the moment he attempted to withdraw the money, and I would be there to witness it. When morning finally came, Michael kissed me on the cheek as he left, his usual smugness practically radiating off him. "Wish me luck," he said, grabbing his bag. "Good luck," I replied, my voice steady. "I hope everything works out exactly the way you want it to." It wasn't a lie, after all. As soon as Michael's car pulled out of the driveway, I grabbed my bag and left the house. My heart pounded as I drove to the bank, adrenaline surging with every mile. When I arrived, Detective Carter was already there, standing near the entrance with a small team of plainclothes officers. He gave me a curt nod as I approached. "He hasn't shown up yet," Carter said, "but we've confirmed his withdrawal appointment. He'll be here soon." I glanced at the bustling street around us, my stomach churning. "And you're sure this will work? He won't have time to slip away?" Carter's expression was calm but resolute. "As soon as he tries to access the account, the bank will alert us. He won't get far." I stepped back from the entrance, positioning myself just out of sight. From my vantage point, I could see the doors clearly without being noticed. Minutes ticked by, each one feeling like an eternity. Finally, Michael's car pulled into the parking lot. He stepped out, dressed sharply in a tailored suit, looking every bit the successful businessman he liked to portray. My hands tightened into fists as I watched him stroll into the bank, exuding confidence. Inside, the scene unfolded just as Carter had predicted. Michael approached the counter, handed over his information, and waited as the teller accessed the flagged account. Through the glass doors, I saw the moment the teller paused, glancing nervously at a nearby manager. Michael's confident demeanor faltered slightly, but he masked it with a charming smile, leaning casually on the counter as if nothing was wrong. Then the bank manager approached, followed closely by two plainclothes officers. I couldn't hear what was being said, but I saw Michael's face twist in confusion, then indignation. Seconds later, the officers produced their badges and handcuffed him. His protests were muffled by the thick glass, but his body language told the whole story: shock, denial, and finally, panic. I stepped out of the shadows, standing just beyond the bank's entrance as they escorted him outside. When his eyes met mine, his expression morphed into something I'd never seen before: raw fear. "Lillian?" he sputtered, his voice cracking. "What are you doing here?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I pulled a folder from my bag, the divorce papers I'd prepared weeks ago, and handed them to him as the officers led him past me. "Consider this my last donation," I said, my tone icy. His mouth opened to protest, but the officers ushered him into a waiting car before he could say another word. As the car drove away, Carter approached me. "That was clean," he said. "He's not going anywhere for a long time." I nodded, exhaling a shaky breath. For the first time in weeks, the weight on my chest began to lift. It was over. The drive home felt surreal. The morning's events played on a loop in my mind. The officers snapping handcuffs on Michael, the shock in his eyes when he realized I'd been one step ahead all along. I should have felt triumphant, but all I could manage was a mix of exhaustion and relief. The adrenaline that had fueled me for weeks was finally starting to wear off, leaving behind a quiet emptiness. When I pulled into the driveway, Amanda was waiting for me. She'd insisted on coming over to help celebrate, though she knew me well enough to bring a bottle of wine instead of balloons. "Did it go as planned?" she asked as I stepped out of the car. I nodded, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "He's in custody. They got him the moment he tried to access the account. Her eyes widened. And did you... I held up my empty folder, a faint smile tugging at my lips. Delivered the divorce papers personally. Amanda let out a low whistle. Remind me never to get on your bad side. Inside, we sat at the kitchen table, the wine poured and the silence heavy. Amanda finally broke it. So, what now? I swirled the wine in my glass, staring into its deep red depths. Now I figure out what comes next. The house, the finances, everything's in limbo until the legal process is done. But at least I don't have to pretend anymore. She leaned back in her chair, studying me. You know, you handled this better than most people would have. You didn't just sit back and let him walk all over you. I shrugged, feeling the weight of her words. I didn't have a choice. He didn't just betray me. He used our future to fund his lies. I couldn't let him get away with that. As the day wore on, the reality of my new life began to sink in. Michael was gone, his sham of a charity exposed, and the financial mess he'd created would soon be sorted through. There was still so much to do, meetings with lawyers, statements for the authorities, but for the first time, I felt like I could breathe. I stood by the window that evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Amanda had left hours ago, and the house was quiet, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator. This house had once been a symbol of the life Michael and I were building together. Now it felt like a monument to his lies. But it was mine now, and I would rebuild it on my own terms. The day after Michael's arrest, the calls started pouring in. Lawyers, investigators, even family members who'd heard the news and wanted the real story. I sat at the kitchen table with a notepad, scribbling notes as I spoke with Detective Carter. The charges against him are solid, he explained. Fraud, embezzlement, and falsifying charity documents. He'll face serious jail time, especially with the evidence you provided. What about the money he took? I asked, tapping my pen against the notepad. The funds are frozen for now, Carter replied. Once the investigation is complete, we'll work to recover what's left. As for the assets he purchased, those will likely be seized as part of the case. I nodded, a sense of satisfaction settling over me. For the first time, it felt like there was a clear path forward. Later that afternoon, I met with my lawyer, a sharp-witted woman named Clara who wasted no time getting to the point. With the divorce papers served and his arrest on record, the proceedings should be straightforward, Clara said, flipping through a thick folder of documents. You'll have a strong case for securing the house and protecting your remaining assets. And the joint savings? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. That's trickier, Clara admitted. Depending on how much he's squandered, there may not be much to split. But given the circumstances, I'll push for you to retain the lion's share. I nodded, bracing myself for the financial fallout. I just want this over with. It will be, Clara assured me, her tone firm. You've taken the hardest steps already. The rest is just paperwork. Over the next few days, I focused on untangling my life from Michael's. I contacted the bank to update my accounts, scheduled consultations with financial advisors, and started sorting through the mess he'd left behind. It was exhausting, but with every task I completed, I felt a little lighter. Amanda stopped by one evening with takeout and a bottle of wine. You're looking better, she said, handing me a plate of lo mein. Like you've finally gotten some sleep. Barely, I said with a laugh, sinking into the couch beside her. But it feels good to be doing something, you know. For so long I felt stuck, like I was just going through the motions. Now I feel free. She raised her glass in a toast. To freedom, then. I clinked my glass against hers, a smile breaking across my face. To freedom. As the days turned into weeks, I began to see the pieces of my life coming together. The legal proceedings were underway. The investigation into Michael's fraud continued, and I was slowly reclaiming my independence. One evening, I found myself standing in the living room, staring at a bare patch on the wall where Michael's prized painting used to hang. It had been seized as part of the investigation, and in its absence, the space felt brighter, lighter. I smiled, realizing that the emptiness wasn't a void. It was a clean slate, and I was ready to fill it with something better. A month after Michael's arrest, I stood in the living room, surrounded by boxes. The house felt different now, quieter, lighter, almost like it was holding its breath, waiting for its next chapter. I was packing up the last remnants of his presence, ties, cufflinks, and the stack of notebooks he always claimed held his brilliant ideas. Most of it was evidence now, boxed and labeled for investigators. There was a strange satisfaction in watching it all disappear. Each item that left the house felt like a weight being lifted, a small step closer to reclaiming the space as my own. The legal proceedings were progressing smoothly, thanks to Clara's no-nonsense approach. She called one morning with an update. "The judge is leaning in your favor," she said. "Given the circumstances, you're likely to retain full ownership of the house and any remaining savings." I leaned back in my chair, relief washing over me. "That's good news," I said, though the reality still felt surreal. "There's also talk of restitution," Clara added. "If the court finds him guilty on all charges, he could be ordered to pay back some of what he took." I raised an eyebrow. "From where? His fake charity account?" She chuckled. "Point taken. But it's a symbolic victory, if nothing else." As I worked through the legal and financial logistics, I also started thinking about my next steps. For years, I'd poured my energy into supporting Michael and his ambitions, often at the expense of my own goals. Now, with him out of the picture, I had the freedom to focus on myself. Amanda was the first to suggest I take some time away. "You've been through hell, Lillian," she said one evening as we shared a bottle of wine. "You deserve a break, somewhere sunny with no reminders of Michael or his nonsense." The idea was tempting, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to leave just yet. "I feel like there's still so much to do here," I said, gesturing to the stack of paperwork on the table. "You've done more than enough," Amanda insisted. "The house, the finances, the legal stuff, it's all under control. Take a week, recharge, and come back ready to tackle whatever's next." She had a point. The next morning, I booked a flight to the coast. It wasn't a grand vacation, just a small getaway to clear my head and figure out what I wanted my future to look like. As I packed my bag, I felt a sense of anticipation I hadn't experienced in years. For so long, my life had revolved around Michael, his needs, his plans, his betrayals. Now, for the first time, I was making decisions purely for myself, and it felt incredible. When the plane took off, I looked out the window, watching the city shrink beneath me. It was a moment of quiet clarity, a reminder that the past didn't define me, and the future was mine to shape. The trip to the coast was exactly what I needed. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe without the weight of Michael's lies pressing down on me. I spent my mornings walking along the beach, the salty breeze clearing my mind, and my afternoons reading novels I'd never had time for. By the third day, I felt a clarity I hadn't experienced in years. Michael's betrayal had taken so much from me: time, trust, a sense of security. But it hadn't taken me. I was still here, still standing, and for the first time, I realized just how strong I was. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I sat on the deck of my rental cottage with a notebook in hand. I'd always been the planner in the relationship, the one who mapped out budgets, vacations, and future goals. But now, the blank page in front of me wasn't for anyone else. It was for me. At the top, I wrote, "What's next?" The list came quickly, almost effortlessly. Redecorate the house, make it mine, reconnect with friends, build the relationships I'd neglected during my marriage, pursue my career, invest in myself, forgive myself, let go of the guilt for trusting someone who didn't deserve it. By the time I set the pen down, the page was full, and for the first time in months, I felt hopeful. When I returned home, the house felt different. It wasn't just the absence of Michael's things. It was the absence of him, his presence, his lies, his shadow over everything. I started small, rearranging furniture and swapping out the art on the walls. Each change felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. I also began reaching out to old friends, people I'd drifted away from during the chaos of my marriage. Their support was overwhelming, a reminder that I wasn't alone in this new chapter. One afternoon, as I was clearing out the garage, I found a box labeled Keepsakes. Inside were photos, cards, and mementos from the early days of my relationship with Michael. For a moment, I considered tossing it all into the trash, but instead, I set it aside. Those memories were part of my story, even if they belonged to a chapter I was ready to close. I didn't need to erase the past to move forward. I just needed to own it and let it go. The months that followed were a period of quiet rebuilding. I threw myself into reclaiming my life, one small victory at a time. The house, once a reminder of Michael's betrayal, began to feel like my own. I painted the walls in colors that brought me joy, replaced the furniture with pieces I loved, and turned his old office into a library filled with books I'd always wanted to read. Friends and family noticed the change, not just in the house, but in me. "You seem lighter," Amanda said during one of her visits. "Like you finally let go of all the weight you were carrying." "I think I have," I replied with a smile. "It's amazing what happens when you stop living for someone else." Professionally, I began pursuing opportunities I'd put on hold during my marriage. Michael had always dismissed my ambitions, telling me I was better suited to supporting his vision. Now I was free to build my own. I reached out to a former colleague who connected me with a consulting project. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start, and it reminded me of what I was capable of. One evening, as I reviewed a client proposal at the kitchen table, I felt a sense of pride I hadn't felt in years. This was mine, not something I'd done for Michael, but something I'd built for myself. Meanwhile, the legal process with Michael moved steadily forward. Clara kept me updated, and each new development felt like another step toward closure. The day the divorce was finalized, I celebrated with Amanda over dinner. "To new beginnings," she said, raising her glass. "To never settling again," I added, clinking mine against hers. A few weeks later, I received a letter from the court regarding the restitution case. Michael had been ordered to repay a portion of the stolen funds, money I knew I'd likely never see, but it was a symbolic victory nonetheless. I tucked the letter into a file, feeling a sense of finality. Michael's chapter in my life was officially closed. That evening, I sat on the couch with a cup of tea, watching the sunset through the newly cleaned windows. The house was quiet, but it no longer felt empty. It felt like home. For so long, I'd defined myself by what I'd lost: trust, security, love. But now I was learning to define myself by what I'd gained: strength, independence, and the knowledge that I could rebuild, no matter how much had been taken from me. As the last rays of sunlight faded, I opened my notebook and flipped to the list I'd made months ago. Most of the items were checked off, but there was one I still needed to work on: forgive myself. I smiled, feeling a sense of peace. That was a work in progress. But for the first time, I felt ready to take it on.